I noticed two people from the same set of circumstances, okay? Two people from the same set of circumstances. One person would constantly talk about that circumstance as a hindrance. The other person from the exact same set of circumstances would use that, they would see it as an opportunity to overcome, or they ended up using it as an opportunity to overcome, which is why I ended up being inspired by this story in the first place. And the more I would hear those stories, I'm like, man, your story is so amazing, right? Because once again, I'm hearing from the stories of victory, but at the same time, as I'm hearing the story of victory, I'm thinking of somebody from the exact same set of circumstances that is still talking about whatever that trauma, whatever that past life circumstance, whatever that failure, whatever it is that happened to them. And I'm like, what is the difference between the two different individuals?
Right. All right. So, Paul, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the leadership position that you're at right now.
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt. Like yourself, and one thing about us, we went to grad school together. We were in that Masters of Teaching program at
We did.
VCU, but I took a different route. I actually went directly into working for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I did that for about 8 years, and then I left FCA and actually got into the classroom. The thing is, I was actually working at a private day school, and it actually shut down after the first semester. So I was a bit shocked, a bit confused. I'm like, okay, as a Christian, I'm thinking I was following the Lord's leading. Um,
Mhm.
when it comes to leaving this ministry and then going into my educational background, which was teaching. And then from there, when the school shut down, I didn't know what to do. And then I actually wrote my book during that time. We could talk about that, a little bit later in the interview. But from there, I got into corporate America. And while I was in corporate America, I started something with my boys. My boys were playing soccer. I have four sons, PJ, Joseph, David, Noah, and my oldest two sons, PJ and Joey, were playing soccer. And around this time, there were so many funny things that were happening on the soccer field. So what I began to do is I began to record these. I began to record these videos about fatherhood and when things happen on the soccer field, so on and so forth. And what ended up happening is I started a blog from those videos called Fatherhood on the Fly. And from that Fatherhood on the Fly, it started with silly videos about things that my boys were doing, to simple things or simple principles that had helped me in my journey to fatherhood. So around this time, and this is definitely a non-traditional route to leadership, school leadership.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what happened from that time, a school leader was following my blog, and he actually reached out to me on Facebook and said that the things that I was putting in my Fatherhood on the Fly blog were things that he wanted to see imparted to his students. Now, Matt,
Wow.
at
Okay.
this time, I had been in corporate America for 4 years. I had just gotten a nice raise and a nice promotion. So
Yeah.
to have a conversation about school leadership when I felt like I was really getting my footing in corporate America was pretty interesting, to say the least. But at the same time, I felt like that was the route that God was calling me to. I'm going on my fifth year in school leadership.
So isn't that, it's so funny because I was literally just thinking about this. I had to yesterday do the intro, like my daughters and I did offering yesterday at church. So we got up there and we presented. And I always feel like that's how God works. It's all, and I can say that in my own life. It's almost like I won't say he waits for me to get comfortable, but it's like right when I feel like I got it, and it's like, okay, I'm resigned to whatever it is I'm supposed to be doing. It's almost like he waits for me to be like okay with whatever his plan was before he's like, oh, you good? You comfortable?
Right.
Got you. All right, now let's go in this direction. And it's like, yo, like I thought you wanted me here. And he's like, I did want you here. And now I want you over here. Like your storyline sounds so consistent with how God tends to move.
Right, right, right. Yeah, and to this day, it's still amazing to me because if you would have asked me prior to me going into corporate America. I mean, I literally went into corporate America because simply because I needed a job, and
Yeah.
being that the school shut down halfway through the school year, there weren't many schools that were hiring in January, outside of
Yeah. Yeah.
perhaps a
Right.
paraprofessional, type role. So I had to find something that was able to support my family. And the reality is Matt, I never would have saw myself in corporate America. That was never a part of my dream. That was never a part of my ambition. But there were so many things that I learned in corporate America. It's amazing how you have the links or just the common threads that you see, whether it's from my time with FCA, my time in corporate America, whether it was corporate sales or simply just in a business type atmosphere doing corporate real estate research. I would have never thought in a million years that I would have been doing anything along those lines. But there's certain lessons along each journey, each step of the path that helped me even to get to where I currently am today.
So let's get into that then. So you went to school, and I got a great picture. I may put it up during the in the podcast of you and I with our robes on,
I
about to
remember that picture.
graduate.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember that. I still have that picture. So let's start from the beginning. You're training to be a teacher, but then you have this kind of winding road to finally get to this point as a dean. At each stop, what do you feel like, and if you could be specific, that'd be great. What do you think you got from each stop, starting from VCU grad school all the way here? What are the things you felt like were deposited in you that you're using now in your leadership role?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So when I was with VCU, and I remember specifically there was some sort of assignment that we had to do, and around this time I'd actually been offered a teaching job in the city of Richmond, and I had also been offered to consider coming on staff in the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I was torn, man. I was really torn because the one thing that I really wanted to do was work with young people. So whether that was with FCA or teaching, the heart of what I wanted to do was work with young people, and it goes back to, and this is good because now that you asked this question, I really begin to really make even more connections. It really goes back to the belief that my track coach had placed in me when I was in high school. A decent runner, okay, my 4x8 relay team. I remember back in 2002, we went into the state championship ranked like number 15 in the state, and we finished number
Wow.
3. Okay, and,
Wow.
and we everybody was shocked. They were like, "Who are these guys from Nansemond River High School? That are kind of showing up when we always did well in the district and region, but on the state level, that was something completely different for us. We kind of came out of nowhere. But what my coach did, my coach had this this gift of infusing belief. He
Mm,
had this gift of infusing belief into us as runners. This guy had me thinking I was going to the Olympics, and I wasn't even the best person. Not only was I not the best person on our track team, I wasn't even the best guy on our relay team. Okay, but
wow.
he made me believe so much in myself. And Matt, if I'll be honest, his belief in me as an athlete is what encouraged and inspired me to go in education. His
Gotcha.
belief in me.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, okay, our background was social studies, right? Man, you want to be a social studies teacher.
Yep.
I can't say that I was as passionate about social studies as I was in just infusing and inspiring, students like my coach did me. That's what I wanted
Okay.
to do. I really
Gotcha.
wanted to inspire students because I knew what my coach did for me. So I remember when I was student teaching, there were these opportunities. Students would come up to me. I was at Franklin Military in Richmond, Virginia, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so I would never forget. Students would come up to me and they would ask, excuse me, students would come up to
You're
me
good.
and would ask, different questions, and that was like my wheelhouse. As a matter of fact, the lady who I did my student teaching under, her name is Patricia McGowan, and I love her to this day. We still catch up to this day. She said that she still tells me, I'll be 40, I'm 40 years old this year. And, I was 22 years old when I was working with her. And I remember, like, back then and even today, she'll talk about the boys that would come around my desk because I always had ESPN up looking at whatever the stats were from the prior night's games. So basically, what she saw was the strength that God had given me in building a relationship. Building a
Mm.
relationship has been a part of my journey. So when it came time to decide whether to teach or go into FCA, she's actually one of the mentors, if you will, that encouraged me to strongly consider the FCA route because
Wow.
of that gift of building relationships with students. But what she saw was that it was so effective around sports. She also dropped me off because when I was in college, I didn't have a car, which is why all of my stuff had to be in the city of Richmond. So she would drop me off in my dorm, in my dorm. And then once I would get out of the car, she would see certain athletes come to the car and just greet me. And these were athletes at the time. I wasn't running track anymore at VCU because I had finished my career. These were athletes who were still participating in their given sport who were a part of my FCA group. And she saw the relationships. To this day, she still brings it up. She said, "I'll never forget that young lady that came up to my car and talked about the sort of impact that you had on her life." And she said, "When I saw the impact that you were having, and I saw the relationships that you were building, not only with our students, at Franklin Military, but also with the student athletes at VCU," she said, "I think that's where you need to go, was FCA."
Yeah.
So what I
Wow.
so what I did was I took that same passion that I had, and I took that passion and that inspiration and that belief in students to my career fellowship of Christian athletes. What's amazing about that is that there's a big fundraising aspect to my work with fellowship of Christian athletes. So that fundraising aspect actually helped to prepare me for my life in the corporate world because all of a sudden I'm
Okay.
having to work with donors. I'm having to work with businessmen. I'm having to work with salesmen, and all of it is relationship based. So I have the relationships on one hand that I'm building with students, but I also have the relationships on the other hand that I'm having to build with donors. And let's just say it was a rough start. It was a rough start,
Right.
but I grew quite a bit over the 8 years, in building relationships, whether it's in the classroom or through the fellowship of Christian athletes was a common thread, and it's still to this day. We graduated college, I guess, about 17, 18 years ago now,
Okay.
and to this day, that is still the common thread for everything that I do is effective relationship building.
So we've gotten to, and I feel like we're gonna go back, but
Okay,
now it's almost like now I want to jump forward. So you are the dean, and we're gonna get into a lot of things because you've got the book, you've got some media things that you are working with now that I think is pretty cool. As a dean, can you do two things for me? One, define what you do as a dean, because sometimes people hear the word dean and that can go a lot of different places, right? It can just be all discipline, it can just be all working with students. And we're gonna go back to the corporate world and how you even got in here, but define what a dean is and how building relationships are so important in this leadership role for you.
okay, that's a great question. So I remember when I was at Elijah House Academy, and that's actually the school where I worked coming out of corporate America. I will never forget the day that I was on the phone with a parent because part of my job, is a big part of my job is discipline. So I was on the phone with a parent, and that parent said that anytime I hear your voice, I know it's not a good phone call.
I've been there.
Yeah, and but what's funny, Matt? Until this parent said that, and unfortunately, the child that I was dealing with at the time had got in frequent trouble, or had some frequent challenges. Let's just say that. Uh, but the reality is that even though that was that parent's perspective based on some of the things that their child was doing, that was not my perspective at all. And I would give the head of school, credit. Perhaps I'll give him some credit for this because he talked about me playing. And this was a Christian school. Elijah House, the school where I currently am is not a Christian school, but where I was a Christian school. He talked about the dean having a almost having the role of helping to shepherd the student body. And so what's interesting is being that it was introduced to me in that manner, that's the approach that I took. And to this day, that is still the approach. Even though I'm not in a Christian school anymore, that is still the approach that I take. My job My goal, my role is to help to shepherd, the student body. There are some who have, amazing fathers. There are some who don't have fathers at all. So yes, I am in charge of, and I am responsible for discipline, but I tend to go back to that relational piece because it's so huge. The relational piece and being a dean of students is so huge. The reality is, intentional as I try to be, we have over in my current school, we have about right around 600 students. As intentional as I try to be, and that is my goal at all times. Sometimes I don't get to really know a student until they get in trouble. Of course, we have some
Right.
of course, we have some who have outgoing personalities, and they're just going to come greet you no matter what. But then we have those quiet students, and I can tell you about something that I did this year that actually opened the door for me to build a
Mhm.
relationship with some of the quieter students. But the reality is, for the ones who have say repetitive challenges, if you will, as a dean of students, what it does for me, it helps to open that door. Okay. It helps to open that door, and I'm able to talk with the student, get to know the student, try to ask pertinent questions, to try to understand, like where are you coming from? Why are you making these decisions? Try to understand a little bit more about their background, because I know if I understand of this student a little better, it helps me to be able to communicate with the student. It helps me to be able to speak that student's language. One thing I heard, at a conference a while back is that, you know, it's hard you can't take someone to a higher ground until you find common ground. So a lot of times when it comes to dealing with students and adults, I try to find some sort of common ground to let them know that hey, I'm hearing you. I hear you and I see you. And when I see that student, it helps to build and gain trust. It helps to build and gain trust with that student. So then my role becomes, I'm not just a disciplinarian. I become somebody that could be trusted. And then when you
Yeah.
have someone that's trusted within a school, all of a sudden, you, word begins to get around. Okay, well, Mr. Henderson isn't just, whatever the opinion may have been, right? Mr. Henderson is somebody
Yeah.
that you can go to, that you can trust. And if I have to handle discipline, I still have to do it because that's part of my job. But I want the students to know that this is a safe space for you to come, where we could talk about problems, talk about issues, where we could do some goal setting to help you grow, as a young person.
So then how do you take that after you've built that trust? And then, because most of the time, if you're dealing with a student, they really didn't get in trouble with you. They really got in trouble somewhere else. So, how do you build that trust between that student and maybe the other staff member or maybe the other student, right, that they may have had gotten in conflict with? How do you now step in? Look, if we're using the terms shepherd, now you're kind of stepping in as mediator, right, between these individuals. How do you do it? What strategies do you use to kind of build that up?
Sure. So I can think back on a few different situations. Sometimes what I'll do, because as a staff, we're a team. Okay, we're a team. It's not just the admin in one section, teachers over here, or no. We're all supposed to be working together, for the benefit of the children. Part of my issue sometimes, Matt, it's not a bad issue. My heart, I love students. I love students.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. I also see staff as well. And
Mhm.
part of the reason is because I think being that I came into education in a non-traditional way,
Mhm.
when I first got to Elijah House Academy, man, I was supervising teachers who had been working 30
Mhm.
plus years in education. So
Yeah.
I automatically went in saying, okay, I cannot be a know-it-all when I'm just now getting back into education, and I have to figure out a way to gain trust. So what I did was I was intentional about building relationships with staff, and at the same time intentional about building relationships with students. And what that helped me to do was become a bridge between the students
Mhm.
and staff,
Mhm.
especially the students that have been causing some sort of causing some sort of challenges. So sometimes what I'll do is, there are times where I'm able to perhaps get a bit more out of the student that perhaps that teacher was able to, and for good reason. Because the teacher at Elijah House, this class is maxed out at about 15. In my current school, they
Okay.
max out at between 25 and 30. So the teacher may not have the time that I have to sit down with that student and dig a little deeper. So when I'm able
Yeah.
to dig a little deeper, what I can do is I can bring back some of that information that I've learned and share it with the teacher to help them understand what is going on with the student, right?
Gotcha.
So there's been so many times where I remember toward the end of this past school year, a teacher brought up a particular student's name and not just ran down a list of things that I knew what's going on with the student. Teacher who has way more experience in education, she's probably old enough to be my mother. She said, Mr. Henderson, you really know all the students. And do I really know all of the students that well? No, but some of the students that she's had trouble with, they happen to be in my office. And I take the time
Right.
to get to know them. I take the time to understand where they're coming from, why are they making the decisions that they're making, and I'm able to take that information back to her. And so what we've been able to do is now that I've taken the information back to her, it gives her a frame of reference of how to deal with the student. And there have been times where I've played the mediator. Well, I'll take the student back to class and we'll just pop out in the hallway for a brief conversation. I like to call it, almost like a restorative circle between the teacher, the student, and myself. And I'm there to support both, to let the staff know, hey, I support you. Let the student know, hey, I will stand with you as you make things right. Okay. And I think that's part of supporting. From my experience, I believe both student and staff have felt supported by me when doing that. And it's imperfectly, but the goal is that the staff feels supported, but that the student also feels supported and empowered to make the right decision, because they're not always in these types of environments. They're not always encouraged. Perhaps their home life may not be one that encourages some sort of restoration. In my home life, it is. With my four sons, it is. But one thing I've come to know is that all parents don't necessarily encourage that sort of restoration when it comes to, or reconciliation when it comes to relationship building.
So now we're gonna jump back because you said relationship, and especially you said in the corporate world, that kind of helped, build some things into you about relationship. So what did you learn from the corporate world that you feel like has impacted what you're doing as a leader now?
Sure. Okay, so I mentioned that I got a promotion right before I got back in the education. If
Yes.
if we rewind just a bit, I was working for a commercial real estate group, and I was doing commercial real estate. It was like information and research, so I was constantly on the phone with commercial real estate brokers. Now, so going back to my time in corporate America, I was working for a commercial real estate and research company, and once again, right before I got back in education, I just got a promotion and a nice significant raise. And I'll be honest, this was during COVID. I was working from home. My wife and I had just had our fourth child. Had one of my sons were in school at the house. I mean, it was just a crazy time. But I talked with my supervisor, and it's funny, every evaluation that I ever did, I always told him that I was not looking to climb the corporate ladder, because you have some that went into that job because they were looking to eventually get into some like real estate or commercial, whether it was residential real estate or commercial real estate. And this job
Yeah.
was something really good to be on the resume. For me, it was just a stable job to help take care of my family at this point. I wasn't looking to climb the corporate
Gotcha.
ladder. I wasn't looking to get in the management or anything. I was simply looking to take care of my family, because there were some things that I was just a bit more passionate about, and I felt like climbing the corporate ladder would have taken away from that. So I remember getting that promotion. I had no idea that I was up for a promotion. Okay. And then I asked my supervisor, I said, okay, what happened? Like I was so thrown off, when he let me know what was going on. And I said, okay, so how did this happen? He said, Paul, there are people who have been working here for a while that may have, industry knowledge, if you will. He said, but there's one thing that you have. He said, man, you are really good at building relationships. And I was like, okay, really? And he told me that there were people in the area where I worked for this particular job. I was constantly on the phone with people from northern New Jersey in New York. And he told me that there were people who had years of experience in commercial real estate that were requesting to work with me. I was completely shocked, but he said, here's the thing. He says, not that you do all the details, I just had a way of saying, hey, you know what? I don't know, but let me see if I can look around and just get back with you. And there was just something that I was doing. I don't know if it was just a God-given gift where I always saw
Yeah.
the customer, I always saw the client. Now that wasn't an excuse for me to not grow, in the knowledge, the industry knowledge, so on and so forth. But it was the fact that I was able to build relationships. I mean, there was this one lady, I mean, nobody wanted to work with her. On our entire team, everybody knew who she was. Nobody wanted to work with her. And this lady she requested to work with me, and I was like, okay. But I figured her out. I figured there were just certain things that she was looking for. It wasn't that she was just mean all the time. She worked in a pretty intense environment. And I think she ended up finding out that I saw her, or she realized that I saw her
Mm.
for who she was, and she was just in a tough environment. And I did my very best to communicate with her well. I gave her, an expectation of when I could get, certain information back to her. And I think I just did a good job of being consistent. So
Yeah.
so when I saw that, it really spoke to me because I'm like, this is a skill that helped me, when I was with FCA. It helped me, when I first started teaching, and then it's helped me to this day, even in corporate America. It's that simple strength and aspect of just building relationships.
So where does Slave No More? So you've written a book. I believe it's done very well. I remember during the season when it was being created and when it came out, because obviously watching each other on Facebook. So I remember it was, you started putting things out, and I was like, oh shoot. And I will tell you too, I appreciate you going out and writing that, because it's also encouraged me to now start making, like, you have these visions of what you want to do, and sometimes it just takes somebody else to do it, to be like, oh, all right, cool. Like, that was in my heart. I want to try to do something as well. Where does Slave No More come into play here? Tell us a little bit about it, but also kind of where does this come from?
Right, right. Well, just going back to how you've inspired me, when I saw, you dropping the podcast, that inspired me to finally get mine up and going one day at a time with Paul Lay Henderson. And so I want to just give you that same credit, man, because seeing you drop the podcast and now I'm actually on your podcast, you actually
Yeah,
encouraged me to get mine up and going. So thank you, sir. So let's look at my book Slave No More. So this was right around, I started writing this book around 2017. And it actually went back to an original vision that I had a little bit earlier on. I knew that I wanted to write years before, but because what was happening as somebody who watches society and watches people, and I observe people's stories, and, I would hear these different testimonies of different people who had overcome certain things. So the common thread that you'll actually see in Slave No More is different individuals who have overcome diverse obstacles. So every time I heard somebody's story of overcoming, I automatically thought of someone who's in very similar, almost identical circumstances, but they were constantly talking about the obstacle. So I'm thinking, okay, I have one person that's talking about how they overcame, another person talking about is still talking about the obstacle. I'm like, what is the difference? So what ended up happening was every single character, because the book ended up being inspirational fiction, every single character that was in my story were people that I interviewed, except for maybe a couple that were fictional characters that I made up. But each character were people that I actually interviewed who had amazing testimonies of overcoming some sort of diverse odds. Now, once again, as I'm interviewing them, I'm either thinking of people or hearing in their story people from the exact same set of circumstances who are still there. They're talking about the circumstances. Meanwhile, I'm talking to someone who found a way to overcome. Every single one of them that overcame had the exact same thing in common: a strong vision. And they allowed that strong vision,
mm,
or that God-given vision, to become bigger than the obstacle. So as I'm interviewing them, man, I tell you what, man, I'm inspired right along with them. And what's amazing is during this time, I'm actually out of work. I started writing this book in 2017. when I didn't have a job, right? I've been out of work for about 3 months during this
Wow.
time.
Yeah.
And the pastor, there
Wow.
was a pastor I was talking to at the time. He said, "Hey, maybe there's something that you want to work on that that you have actually maybe a little bit more time to work on while you're still looking for a job." And that's exactly what I did. So rather than just having a woe is me attitude while I don't have a job and I'm married with, we had just had our third baby while I'm out of work, I found the opportunity in that, which was to write. Now, the book, I thought it was going to come out as a collection of stories, but it ended up coming out as inspirational fiction. And I can honestly say that if I were working a job at the time, I can't say that I would have had the freedom, the mental freedom and the mental clarity to come up with an inspirational fiction type of story. I had never written fiction in my life. So to write a fiction book, I actually had more time to think about. I would write between the hours of 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. while my wife was nursing our baby. Because once again, if I were working, I don't know that I would have the time to write between the hours of 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. because I would have to get
All
up and go
right.
to work the next day. So that was an obstacle that I faced, and I ended up seeing an opportunity, and that vision to complete that book became stronger than the obstacle of not having a job, which is what I did.
So take the lessons from Slave No More. And I'm always thinking about, and this the goal of this podcast is our individuals. The goal of this podcast is to help school leaders not burn out. To
Hmm.
be all honest with you, like
Sure.
I have a particular episode that just came out, and I talk about the burnout that happened with me being in a very, very dark place in my last position, to the point where I was like, I was running out of the school. Like I couldn't get out of the building fast enough. And it was during COVID. So it was very tough season. Take from Slave No More, what would you say to a leader who is struggling with burnout and right now can't see the victory, right? That's on the other side and is really only focusing on the obstacles that are in front of, whether that's teacher retention, whether that is student discipline, whether that's their own home life and balancing the workload. Like, what could you do? Or what could you say to encourage them?
I'm a big Philadelphia Eagles fan, just so you know. And my quarterback, Jalen Hurts, he is something that he's constantly saying. Almost, I listen to his interviews, and a lot of times I listen to interviews from different athletes and coaches or people that have been successful because I want to hear their mindset. And one thing he always says is you got to keep the main thing the main thing. And I love that he says that. So for me, the main thing is simply why. Why did I get into education in the first place? Why the Because with everything that goes on, and as a principal, you're busier than me. I'm primarily working with behavior and student culture, so on and so forth. I mean, but you're dealing with stuff that's even far beyond what I'm dealing with, plus a little plus a little bit of what I'm dealing with, right? So when
Yeah.
I think about that interview that I had with Elijah House back in 2021, I remember the last question being asked, and I had a limited amount of education experience at the time. I feel like it's still limited, but I'm going into year number 6 total. I mean, when I was with FCA, I was in schools, but more so, um, as an additive, if you will. I was still working with
Yeah.
students and everything, but I wasn't reported to a principal or anything along those lines. So I was working with students and teachers for about 8 years, but in a different light. But actually being in the school, I'm going into year number 6. So I remember when I was asked about why would I leave corporate America to go back into education. I will never forget it. I don't necessarily recommend this strategy to anybody because it kind of threw me off guard. Man, a brother broke down and cried, and I said because I love kids. And I was like, where is this coming from? Okay. Like, where is this coming from? Because that was definitely not the plan coming into this
Yeah.
interview at the time. I was working with my own sons, and I still do that. And I have rhythms with my own children that we do on a weekly basis because of course, I love my own children. But at the time, I was doing some work with the youth at my church. But this overwhelming love and passion for kids and for young people, it was almost like it just
Mhm.
overtook me. So on the days where it's the toughest, every once in a while, I'll have just that one student or a handful of students that will come up and just hug me and say, "Hey, Mr. Henderson," or they'll just give you that smile or whatever it is. It helps to remind me of why I got back into education in the first place. Remembering the why, remembering because I think a lot of times when we get to that place where we're feeling that burnout, okay, when we're feeling that burnout,
Mm.
it's almost like the challenges have overtaken the why, right? The challenges of what we're dealing with on a daily basis, and they're tough challenges. I'm not downplaying anybody's challenges. I'm not downplaying any sort of hard parent relationships or hard administrative things that we have to deal with. But the reality is that sometimes we allow those to get bigger than the why. Why did we get back into education in the first place? For me, it is my love for children and wanting them to see themselves in the positive light, wanting to help our students to develop a strong vision for their lives. There are students I've talked to and I said, "What's your vision for your life?" And they'll just look at me like I'm crazy, like, "What are you even talking about?" And I
Yeah.
have that opportunity every day in the midst of what's going on. I have that opportunity every day to talk with a student and say, "What's your vision?" And then also help. And then if once they tell me, or if they don't even know what it is, I have an opportunity to help that student develop a vision and develop some sort of a game plan, even if it's just a 30,000-foot game plan. I'm able to help them. So when I remember that, okay, it helps on those tough days, because the tough days, let's be real. The tough days are inevitable. If they're going to come,
Yeah.
we're working with people, right? We're working with students. We're working with parents. We have staff that we're working with. We have administrative decisions that we're like, okay, where did that? There are so many things that happen, right? But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
what's always helped me is just keeping the main thing, even when I get distracted, coming back to why I chose to work with students in the first place.
And I was about to ask you, I was gonna say, hey, if there was one thing that you could leave our listeners with, like if it was, this is all you've got, and I'm gonna make sure you have it before I get off this pod, what would you give? And honestly, I think what you just said is the key. I know for myself, when I am feeling like this is just not it, something always happens where there's a student, like you said, who smiles or gives you a hug, or a parent who calls and it is like, hey, thank you so much for working with my child. Or sometimes it's just being very intentional about saying, hey, you know what? Instead of going in the classrooms and doing observations, go play basketball with the boys or the girls, right? Or go into a class and actually, instead of doing the observation, just sit down with them and do the activity with them, right? Talk to the kids, be around them. What I've seen is it's actually great for the staff because they see like, oh, like he wants to be in here other than for
Hmm.
an evaluative role. And then the kids are like, oh, hey. And the more you do that, the more it's comfortable for you to just be around. But like you said, it also just reminds you of why, right? Like, I think I told somebody one time, it's great to hear kids laugh, right? Like, it doesn't
Absolutely.
have to be a lot of stuff. Just to hear them laugh. It's like, man, because I think sometimes as an adult, because you're working and doing all things, you forget what it was like just to be a kid, And so then it reminds you, like, hey, what are the things that we're doing in this building that's actually sucking that out of our kids? And just say, hey, you know what? Yep, we've got the homework. Yep, we've got the testing. Yeah, we got all this stuff. But let's just let them be kids.
Absolutely.
So, nah, I think your words are powerful, man.
Yeah. And to your point, so at the time it's recorded, we're just wrapping up our school year. And I tell you what, I was at our eighth, my school is kindergarten through eighth grade. And toward the end of the year, like at our promotion ceremonies and everything, there were just some of the parents of some of the students who presented some challenges, who came up to me and said, "Thank you so much, Mr. Henderson." And just those thank yous, man. It was a reminder of how, and I'm always, I want to continue to do the right thing because I believe in pouring into children. I believe in giving second chances when necessary. I believe in speaking life in the students. But sometimes it gets hard. But when those
Yeah.
parents come to you and say, "Thank you so much for all of the time that you invested in my child," two that really come to mind, one had a son, one had a daughter, and both came back with such a sense of gratitude. If let me tell you about the girl. Man, this girl, Matt, sometimes I would just say good morning to this girl in the morning, and I'm like, what is so offensive about saying good morning?
Yeah.
Like, my goodness, I'm just met with all the attitude in the world. And I'll be honest, some days I handled it well, and some days it was a bit frustrating. I'm like, young lady, I
Mhm.
say good morning to all students, and I'm not going to switch up just for you, because you need to understand that it's just proper to speak to people in the morning, right? So I would just pour into her, and it was a 2 year process, because I just dropped in my second year here in Detroit, and it was a 2 year process of constantly just encouraging her, with things, and say it's okay to have a positive attitude. It's okay to do certain things, and I'm always speaking life into her. Sometimes I had to give out consequences for different things, and a couple of months ago, I'm talking with her. She actually asked to come speak with me, and I said okay, but we all asked one of the principals to come speak with her as well, so that we wouldn't, so that I wouldn't be alone with this young lady who definitely seemed a bit vulnerable at the time. So I had our female principal, come sit with us, and then she asked the student asked, could I speak with Mr. Henderson, just briefly, just by myself, and the principal is just right there, just so that she could just kind of still be a presence. This girl broke down and apologized to me about the way she had been carrying herself. She apologized about her attitude, about some of the things that she had been saying, some of the ways that she had been treating me. And she said, "I know we have this trip coming up soon, and I'll be honest, that is part of the reason, and I can respect it. Okay." She said, that is part of the reason I'm apologizing." She said, "But I've really been doing some thinking." And she said, not only you, she listed about 6 different staff people in the building that she wanted to apologize to.
Mm.
And then she asked me to walk with her as she apologized to each of these individuals.
Wow.
I mean, Matt, come on now.
Yeah.
See that right there? We don't always get to see that, right? A lot of times
Yeah.
students, it may be down the road, some of the things that we spoken into them, things that we've spoken into their lives, maybe 5, 10 years from now, they'll say, oh, that's what Mr. Mason meant, that's what Mr. Henderson meant. But to have that happen real time, man, I was in my office for the rest of the day. I came home and talked to my wife, and I'm like, perhaps some of the things that we're doing, perhaps it's working. And it's
Actually
that
working.
that type of thing right there, man. You know, when we have those challenging calls, those challenging meetings, I remember students like the one that I'm just telling you about. And it reminds me that it's all worth it. It's worth dealing with the hard things, and it's worth figuring out a way to overcome those hard things, so that we can still have that in.
So for those of you who are listening, know this, you have, and it's something that I've been really working on with myself, you have a choice every day on how you respond to kids, on how you respond to other adults. You just heard Mr. Henderson just talk about how through the good and the bad, like if you stay consistent and loving on your kids and loving on your staff, you truly don't know what life you are to other individuals who really they just need consistent goodness from somebody to happen to them that all of a sudden impacts them later. And you may never see it, right? Like, I mean, yes, he has this great story. It could have been that he never saw that. And that really doesn't hit this young lady till years afterward. But thankfully, he got to see that. And those are the things for us, for those of you who are just coming into the role, that can keep you going, right? So even those things, document those things. So when you're having rough times, write them down and come back to them. So no, I appreciate that story, man. I'm glad you're able to share that with us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I got 3 quick questions for you. These are kind of more fun questions as we end this thing off. So the first question is, give us one book. You can maybe give us two, but give us one book or resource that you feel like, hey, if you're getting into education, you're going to be working with adults, you're going to be working with kids. This is the one or two things that you like. You got to read this. You got to watch this.
Okay, let's see here. For me, you said okay, so one or two books. One is the Marva Collins Way. The Marva Collins Way.
Okay.
Marva Collins was a school educator in on the west side of Chicago, and I remember reading through her book last year. Quite honestly, what she did was actually validate so many things that I felt like God had put in my heart. She had actually had years of experience of putting those things into practice, and it was just so encouraging to kind of at least feel like I was on the right path. She had way more years of experience of actually implementing those things. But even after reading the book, going back and watching some of the interviews that have been done on her in the past, I think she passed away like in 2015 or something like that. But just watching some of the interviews, they even did things where they interviewed students, I think maybe 10 years apart from each other. And she really just implemented some things. She has such a heart for children. She believes in children, that which is one of my core things as an educator is believing. I did a talk here recently about seeing, hearing, and believing. Now, one of her quotes was that she would say to students is, "What we're going to do today, children, is an awful lot of believing in ourselves." So she knew that she was dealing with students who were coming from rougher environments. Some of them may not have been getting that same sort of belief from their parents, but she took it upon herself as an educator. She took it upon herself to be responsible for infusing belief into her students. And something that she was able to do was help them to tackle hard tasks, to read hard texts, so on and so forth. So that's one that really inspired me. And the other one is just a general people skill book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yes.
How to
Okay.
win friends and influence people, because so much of what we do is relational. We always will have our
Yeah.
subject matter, as the teachers have their subject matter, so on and so forth, but there's so much of what we do that is just simple relationship building. So in that type of book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, you're able to learn different tactics and learn different strategies. Think, able to, a good thing about a book is it allows you the opportunity to reflect a bit, and the book can tell you some things about yourself that you may have a hard time hearing from
Yep.
somebody else. And so that's another book that has helped me as well.
Thought you were going to say Slave No More. I thought you were going to say
Of course, of
if
course,
anybody wanted.
you can always check out Slave No More, Conquer the Master Within by Paul A. Henderson.
There you go. That's what I was about to say. That's the number one, and then you can hit those other two too. They
Sure.
they may be on the level of that book. We don't know. Oh, all right. So the next question is, and I'm always interested in this. I love hearing who people pick. So you have a dinner table. You're having an amazing dinner by the top chef in the whole world, excluding you. So you're going to be there. You get to pick 5 people, dead or alive. So throughout history, whoever you want, who would be your 5 people that you would want at that dinner table?
5 people, dead or alive. Oh, this is a great question, man. This is a great question. 5 people, dead or I've already kind of given one away. This is a current is that guy, Jalen Hurts, who's my quarterback for the Philadelphia
Okay.
Eagles. Okay, that's one.
Yes.
Let's see, spot. I would choose as a Christian, I would choose Jesus Christ. All right, two,
He would
three.
dominate that table.
Yeah, yeah, he would. And so part of what I would be doing is just kind of observing him, like how does he handle like all these different people with these different personalities? Who is somebody else that's really it's intrigued me? I am a huge Steph Curry fan. Okay,
Ooh,
I'm a
I
huge
like this
Steph
table.
Curry fan. All right. So I got two athletes. I can't choose any more athletes. I'm just going to keep it at
You can choose whoever you want.
oh,
This is your
okay.
table.
Actually, I am going to choose a third person. I'm going to
Okay.
choose Jackie Robinson.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that's a good one.
yeah. I'm going to choose Jackie Robinson, and then one more person. From this this is very very interesting, and I think it's simply because I live in Detroit now, and I'm still learning about this individual because I see his stuff all around. That is Henry Ford.
Huh? Gotcha.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is out of the box. I would not
Yeah,
have like
it's
gotcha. Okay.
but what's interesting is like the Detroit Lions play in Ford Fields, so still there a
Yep.
sports connection there. I went to a museum like the Greenfield Village Museum here, and then you got the Henry Ford Museum, and this stuff is just all around. So I think I just become so much just so intrigued with him and his story. So that is definitely my out of the box pick right there.
So make sure to go down the list. So you said Henry Ford was last. You had Jesus Christ. You had Jalen Hurts. You had Steph Curry, and you had Jackie Robinson.
Yes.
I like that table, man. I would love to film at that table just to see what
Yeah.
everyone's talking
And
about.
here's the thing: if you ask me tomorrow, that table might be completely different.
Exactly. So the last question for everyone is, who would you like to see on this particular podcast? Whoever you see, you gotta, or whoever you think would be good on this podcast, it's got to be somebody who you can help us get.
Who you would say? Who? You know what? I'm going to recommend my current principal. His name is Devon Graham. He actually
Okay.
played a role in me moving from Richmond, Virginia to Detroit, Michigan, and he's one who has definitely, just he's been really good to my family since we've been here. He helped us to
Okay.
get acclimated to this area, and quite honestly, over the past year, we saw significant change in the culture of our school, and we worked together to do it. But obviously, he's working from a principal seat, and I'm working from a dean seat. So his perspective
Yeah.
is it's going to be a little different than mine. So yeah, he'll be somebody I'm like to see, and I would absolutely love to make that connection.
That's what's up. Yep. I'm looking forward to it. I'm always looking for new leaders or just leaders, period, who have a great word for those who are jumping in. So everybody, we appreciate you. We have the amazing man, the legend, the individual who I got out of grad school with, and we started this education journey together. This is Hot Conversations. Remember, Hot stands for honest, open. Remember, we changed it. It was honest, open, and transparent. But now we're saying it's honest, open, and transformative because we want you to be able to come, listen every week, and then be able to take what you learn and take it out to the job that you're doing. So love you all. Stay hot and keep leading.